C'è un momento in cui le idee non restano più chiuse nei libri, un istante in cui i numeri diventano volti e le parole diventano azioni. Benvenuto a Renaissance in Economics, l'evento dove la ricerca economica civile prende forma, diventa dialogo, visione, futuro. Qui tu sei protagonista, nel pensare, nel proporre, nel condividere un'economia nuova, perché ogni rinascimento nasce da chi crede che sia possibile. Renaissance in Economics 2025, dove l'economia incontra la dignità, dove il futuro si costruisce insieme.
Sorry again for my awful voice. So welcome to this last plenary session. The title is Civil Economy, Wellbeing and Ecological Transition, but I think that we'll be expanding our attention in other relevant issues as well. So let me just briefly introduce the panelists. Well, indeed, Professor Bruno Frey and Phoebe Koundouri, she's online. You have already had the pleasure to meet them this morning and yesterday, so we have learned from them, and we are very grateful for being here with us for this event. So let me just spend a few more words for Rutger Hoekstra, correct? Yes. Because he's just attending this round table. He's associate professor at the Institute for Environmental Sciences at the Leiden University. And going through his CV, what impressed me a lot is that he's a rich experience as an academic, but also as a practitioner and an expert working for many international organizations in the UN system, OECD, World Bank, European Commission, and European Central Bank. Although in these different roles and responsibilities, his major focus of interest is on well-being and sustainability. But thanks to this rich experience, I guess he has been able to find a good balance between research and relevance of research purposes. So he had experiences even in many other organizations, both private and institutional. And he also wrote an interesting book published with Cambridge University Press with a title as Replacing GDP by 2030. So we are almost there. So we are curious to know how we can replace GDP. So I will give the floor first to Rutger, because we didn't have the possibility to learn from him. So we are very grateful that he will be spending a few minutes for just give us his thoughts about the experience that you have had in Florence in light of your professional experience. And then we'll be starting with Professor Bruno Frey and Phoebe Koundouri with just reflecting on a couple of key questions that I think at this point of the conference can help us to make a sort of synthesis of what we have learned during these 2 very intensive days. So the Florence is yours, Rutger, please.
Yes, thank you. Is it? Oh, right, great. Thanks very much to the organizers. As you said, I have a bit of a strange CV. I've only become an academic again 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, and I'm coordinating a European project called Wise Horizons. And in that project, we collaborate, for example, really closely with Mario, and I'd like to thank you also for the invitation to speak today. And so that means that actually after my PhD in 2003, I left academia, and I've spent 20 years in the wilderness, and that gives me perhaps a little bit of a perspective when we're thinking about how do scientific ideas actually come into practice, because I sometimes get a bit upset with the term rethinking. We can rethink all we want, but at some stage you also want stuff to get done, and then you need, I think, also this perspective of how do these things actually change in society. So how did I get here, so to speak? What's the background? I won't go through an entire biography, but the relevant parts that perhaps will inform some of the answers that I'll also give are that I was always, I guess from the age of 7 or 8, I was really motivated or damaged nearly by environmental problems. And I am over 50, so it was acid rain, ozone layer, those things really impacted me. And then my father said to me, well, if you want to solve environmental problems, why don't you go do this new course at Wageningen University called Environmental Economics? Because if you don't understand economics, how can you resolve these issues? And I think it was really sound advice. And in that sense, I'm not that interested in the economic system. I'm interested when it's a system that affects something like environment, inequalities, or well-being. So I think good advice. And then the next stage, so I did a PhD in ecological economics, blah, blah, blah. But then I went to the statistical office and I'd learned from all these great professors that GDP is not a good measure of welfare. You know, you shouldn't use it. And then I was at the statistical office working at the National Accounts Department, and there would be a press release of GDP packed with journalists. And there would be a press release or a press conference on social statistics or environmental statistics, 2 or 3 people from the press. And when the Economist journalists would write about GDP, they would basically have this narrative of growth is good. And so I was like a bit affected, like maybe naive, but the state of the art in economics is that it's not a measure of welfare. It actually says that in the SNA, but yet that narrative persists in society. And from that moment on, I actually became more interested in how these scientific ideas actually transfer into our institutions. How is that proliferation, and how does it affect the narrative? And it also made me a bit more critical, and this was the core point of my book, Replacing GDP by 2030. It also made me a bit more critical about the beyond GDP space, because for 50 years we have been saying, as we do in the manifesto, let's go beyond GDP. And what has been the end result? Hundreds of different systems with dozens of terms and systems and methodologies. And we need to evaluate, I think, after 50 years, when we do want to go beyond GDP, is it really a matter of rethinking all these things? So many brilliant people have thought about this problem. Is it really a matter of rethinking, or is it a matter of implementing and understanding how to get those things done? And that's where I think I could, that's my contribution. There's many, people who can do research. I'm not trying to denigrate that or whatever, but my contribution is that, especially in the UN setting and the international organization, I understand how the sausage is made, so to speak. And this year, 2 quite interesting things have happened. First and foremost, the system of national accounts. So the handbook that guides the way that we measure GDP has been revised in March of this year. And the second chapter of the new system of national accounts is called Wellbeing and Sustainability. And so actually the force of the Renaissance in economics is having an impact even on this very conservative document. Now, I have some criticisms of the content, but I do think as a message to economists, this will be quite an interesting message, because the handbook of GDP has actually shifted and has refocused to showing how important well-being and sustainability are. Second initiative is the high-level expert group on Beyond GDP. And one of your colleagues, and I think well-respected in the Italian and international field, is Enrico Giovannini. And he's actually part of 14 people that will be discussing a global set of indicators and a global framework, really, for measuring beyond GDP. Now, those are the kind of discussions that I think sometimes when I talk to economists, and even also people that are critical of GDP, that then don't even know that there's a process where there's even consultations about the system of national accounts, and they can actually influence that process, I think then actually we're too much in an ivory tower and don't know how our ideas can actually be implemented in the wilderness, so to speak. That will be probably a bit also informing some of the answers that I give. And I would like to say that one of the things that we then, I think, get wrong is that I think in science we have a hope that the best idea wins, right? So we hope that the best idea of beyond GDP will then be the one that's adopted. And I think if you look back at the history of the system of national accounts, there's a lot of arguments to be made that not actually the best system won, and I won't go into details, but that initial phase of the system of national accounts, not necessarily the best idea won, but the idea that was right for that moment and also politically was right for that moment. So I think from that perspective, some of my answers will be given, and I'm happy, very happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion as well. Yeah.
Sort of short round table where we can reflect together on a couple of questions. Let me just welcome again Phoebe Koundouri. Phoebe, can you hear us? Probably not so well me, but okay. Hi, Phoebe. Can you? Oh, we cannot hear you. So wait. We are just asking to the technicians if they can help us to solve the problem. You are able to hear us? Okay, excellent. Just a second in order to see if we can solve the issue. Can you try again?
I can hear you very well.
Excellent, excellent. We can also hear you now. So welcome, Phoebe, again. So as I mentioned before, we have already been able to learn a lot from you. Yesterday, I really appreciated your thought, your rich and inspiring speech, as well as this morning we have learned from Professor Bruno Frey. So the idea now is just to make a sort of joint reflection on a couple of issues that I think that might be relevant to think about it. So I have a couple of questions for all of you. The first, and maybe we can ask to Phoebe to start if she wishes. Yeah. So the first question is the following. We have had a lot of stimulus during these days. A lot of brilliant ideas were floating around these rooms. But my question for you is that, do you have any good suggestions on relevant research avenues and topics that you would like to suggest to a young PhD scholar to be investigated? And also, what do you think are the skills and the competencies, the methods that they should have beyond the more conventional disciplinary competencies? So how we as a professor, we can try to give to these students, to this new generation of economists, methods and tools that can be effective in dealing with complexity and uncertainties in the key relevant topics that we have to deal with in the near future. So yesterday, you, Phoebe, showed us really a rich, complex methodology. And it was extremely fascinating. Yeah, I can see again the slides that you showed us yesterday. So can you please help us to identify a couple of topics that are really challenging, that you strongly suggest to a PhD student as a key topics to be investigated in their PhD program, in their PhD thesis? Please.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm really sorry that I had to fly away today, but it's really a very hectic period, and I have many speeches and meetings. So I am truly grateful to all the efforts about the manifesto. This is a significant step vision first, and then implementation of the vision with regards to having people endorsing this manifesto. And the manifesto has to be endorsed not just from academia, not just from academia, research and innovation, but from all other stakeholders that are relevant in this transformation, the businesses, the financiers, the civil society. It is important to understand that economics is a discipline that can integrate with the other disciplines in order to give solution pathways, optimal mixture of solutions that are relevant, that can be implemented, and that can support human welfare. So in terms of where should we be looking at with regards to skill, again, I will show you some of the work of Euphoria that has focused on this issue. I won't talk about beyond GDP, but I come back to that when we, if we have time later on. But at Euphoria, we have looked at how the different disciplines map to occupations. And this is not a figure for you to look in detail, although I will share my slides, but the impression that I'm trying to convey here, to communicate here, is that the disciplines on the left relate to occupations in sectors of economy in a way that is very integrated. The thickness of the colors indicate the importance of that sector, of that discipline in the occupations, but you can see that the different occupations, education, management, computing and engineering, health, office and administration, service occupations, sales and retail, need knowledge and skills that we come through education in different disciplines. So this is just a deep learning AI exercise that visualizes the true need for interdisciplinarity in order to create people, in order to educate, that is, the labor force to have the skills that are needed to efficiently perform a particular occupation. And the more detail, so this is general for all occupations. Now, for each transformation that we are interested in, and we know that we are in an era of multi-crisis that I talked yesterday about, and all of the speakers talked about. And for this, moving away from this multi-crisis, the socio-economic, environmental, geopolitical multi-crisis, we need to engage in transformations. Now, the different transformations involve energy and climate, for example, involve policy making and geopolicy, involve sustainable management of ecosystems and nature, involve sustainable cities, involve digital transformations, and so on. I'm gonna show you here what it takes for us to embed, to implement the transformation that we voted for as European citizens in terms of the green and digital transition. Now, there is something called the European Green Deal, as you all know, and I referred to this before, which is made up of 150 laws and regulations that have been transposed into national regulations, and we want to implement them. And it concerns implementing policies that allow us to follow the green and digital transformation. That is, to efficiently integrate natural capital in our socioeconomic decisions, and also digitalization, okay? So we try to see what it takes for research, innovation, and the labor market in order to actually implement what we have voted for. And we engaged in a detailed exercise that actually uses data from the European Skills, Competences, Qualifications, and Occupations Framework, which provides the relationships between occupations and the skills and knowledge that are needed to actually be able to perform in those occupations. So at first, we have a data set, and this is not only available for Europe, but the exercise I'm showing you just for the economy of time is for Europe. So what we try to do is to connect the requirements in terms of the labor market skills, knowledge, and occupations for implementing the European Green Deal 150 laws, and identify explicitly what are the skills that are needed and the knowledge that is needed in order to implement them. So this was an AI analysis with all the different laws and regulations that we have committed to implement. And then through the ESCO data set, a detailing of the skills and knowledge that are needed and the occupations that need to exist in order to implement the laws and regulations, the 150 laws and regulations. In order to cut a long story short, this was a machine learning exercise. The full report is fully available. It has been presented at COP28, and various reports after this one at different UN and European multilateral conferences are detailing in the skills and occupations that are needed for the other transformations as well. But let me focus on this one just to give you a feel of the results. So here we identify explicitly which are the green occupations that are needed, which are the digital occupations that are needed, which are the combinations of green and digital occupations that are needed. The level of detail is very, very accurate. And then we also try to answer the question, okay, we know the laws that we voted for and we have to implement. We also know the skills and the occupations that are needed in order to implement these laws. Question, do we have these skills and occupations in our labor market? Answer from our report, 85 of the most needed green and digital occupations and skills are not today in the labor market of Europe, which identifies a big problem. So this big problem basically, and I'm not going through the details of the slides, I'm just showing you so that you get some interest to actually read the report. But the main result of this report is a policy recommendation. A policy recommendation for universities, both at undergraduate, postgraduate, and actually PhD level, but also vocational training for the already existing labor force, to identify the main skills that need to be developed at the different sectors of the economy. For example, the financial sector, we mean mainstreaming of ESGs, enhancing the skills of ESG and SDG matrices, the energy sector, energy efficiency measures, application, renewable energy, skills with regards to emerging energy markets, the manufacturing market, raw materials, pre-processing, distribution, sustainable business, product development, the agricultural sector, advanced wastewater treatment practices, improved packaging, improved sensors, and so on. And at the same time, we also have very specific recommendations for curricular revision for universities and vocational training with regards to the green skills that need to be developed and the digital skills that need to be developed. This is to say that in order to give recommendations to anybody, to the universities, to the researchers, to the PhDs, to the innovation ecosystem, to the research and innovation ecosystem, you really need a very detailed analysis of what we have as a vision for implementation, as already transposed into policy framework and beyond, of course, and then detail the knowledge and the skills and the attitude towards education and upskilling and reskilling, that is multidisciplinarity, bringing the disciplines together, intradisciplinarity, being able to combine scientific and other stakeholders into co-designing of solutions, and then be very accurate about the recommendations that you are giving. And for that reason, we made available is open access and Euphoria AI skills tools that allows you to identify what is the knowledge and skills that are needed for implementing any regulation in the world, then identify what occupations are needed to actually achieve implementation, because the research and innovation is one thing, implementation of actual policies is another step, and you need to make that explicit, and then connect the skills and the knowledge that are needed for the implementation of a policy, for implementation of an innovation, with existing courses that allow you the knowledge, the access to the knowledge, the access to cutting edge research, the access to upskilling and reskilling tools that will equip you to really be able to understand and participate in that particular sector of research or that particular sector of the economy. And we also engage in putting together all the existing training courses. We produce some of them as well. The SDG Academy has hundreds of cutting-edge courses. Euphoria, who also contributes to SDG Academy, has again hundreds of courses, mainly for European stakeholders. So the important thing, and let me close with that, is be very robust with regards to what you are recommending to researchers, to labor market participants, and also to any other stakeholder that is interested to seriously engage in the sustainability transition. You have to be explicit on what we have committed to in terms of policy in 2030, in 2050, what is the vision of the world, what is the transposition of that vision into a policy framework, what research And education is needed in order to create the labor force and the innovation for the implementation of that vision, and then also direct people to courses at different level in the education level that allow them access to that particular labor and to that particular knowledge and skills. Let me close just by saying that it is disheartening that Europe, the leader in the sustainability transformation, is missing 85% of the skills and occupations that are needed for the sustainability transition, as it is mirrored in the European Green Deal policies. Other places in the world are less advanced than Europe, so we are missing more than 85% of the relevant knowledge and skills. Without knowledge and skills, nobody understands, nobody can implement, and nobody will engage in a transition that does not understand and cannot see himself and his children as part of the labor force that will implement the transition. Thank you.
Phoebe, for your intervention. Well, I would say that it is a pity that I cannot see so much space for social sciences and humanities. I think that, personally, I think that there should be also the contribution of social scientists in saying something about the idea of sustainability and innovation. But thank you so much for your intervention. So now I will ask to Professor Frey, more or less the same. This morning you already mentioned some disciplines or some sectors, some areas that can be worth to investigate. So probably not so much environmental economics or behavioral economics nowadays, but other aspects, like, for instance, sociology can be of relevance. So now my question for you is not just the field, but also not just the field, but also some key research questions that you think that might be relevant to investigate. Thank you.
I would like to take up something Rutger said, because I think we have a discussion here and not just statements. What you said is, how do we things put into practice? And now Mrs. Phoebe Koundouri yesterday offered us a huge model with the economy and the ecology and maximized it, or rather optimized it. I think that is the right thing for mathematical persons, but not for social scientists. Social scientists should look at processes. Now my question is to you, Rutger. Do you think that those huge models which the UN, OECD and the EU is offering us will ever put into practice?
Without knowing exactly the full model, I think Phoebe has presented quite a lot of work. I think models in general, I like the ability for tractability. When I was doing environmental economics, one of my environmental economic professors actually said a CGE model is something that you tweak until you get something that you can defend in public. And so tractability, I think, is quite important. I do believe, actually, in some form of, and that's what I did find attractive of Phoebe's models, so some kind of interdisciplinarity, because I do think sometimes these models can be too geared towards the economic system. And we do need models that actually think about sustainability as an ecological system, a social system and an economic system. And sometimes it's a bit too geared towards economic methods. So, for example, I work at an environmental institute, and the terminology of natural capital and the methodologies that are being used, and I worked with the World Bank on measuring natural capital in terms of wealth accounting. To be quite frank, for ecologists, some of those ideas are laughable in the sense of that we're not really treating the environment as a system. So I think there is a trade-off between tractability, I would call it, that when you tweak something in the model, you actually understand the mechanism, because a model is there to help you understand mechanisms. And when there are so many mechanisms that could be the cause of a change, then I think, you know, that's where I would draw the line. At the same time, I do think we're advancing very far. So I hope that answers the question a little bit, and maybe we can continue on that. I would like to, maybe I can pick up the point, because I think what the question was also, what do you see as research gaps? And there I would actually return to my point about serendipity and curiosity. I think people should research what they are curious about. We can understand things. I actually went into input-output modeling in the 1990s, which is you know, the relationships between the economy, and that was developed by Leontiev and was entirely dead as a field in the 1990s. But now with globalization and Trump's tariffs, wow, does that skill actually provide a huge impulse for me trying to understand what globalization has done to environmental problems throughout the world. So I just believe go do what you're curious about, and serendipity will get you there. Perhaps naive, but that's my vision of that. And what I just want to illustrate one thing that I've become really interested in, and that's this problem that I sketched of the narrative spreading in society. How does that happen? So the narrative of growth is good. How does that spread in society? And then I read a book a couple of years ago by Robert Schiller called Narrative Economics, and they actually use methods of looking through newspapers and those kind of things to think about how messages spread in society. And I actually used that to try and understand how the economic message has developed in society. And interestingly, so what really happened was that after the Second World War, basically the UN harmonized all the different ways that there were to measure the national economy into one system. And then they developed, it gradually grew to 200 countries having a statistical institute that actually provide 4 numbers a year on GDP. So that's 800 press releases a year. That goes to dozens, hundreds of media companies. And the interesting thing about the shift from the statisticians to the journalists, we looked at this in the New York Times as well, is that formally you are only allowed to say that GDP increases or decreases. But a journalist likes language, right? They like to use a flowery language. So when it grows, they say it's a strong economy, and it's robust, and when it's going down, it's weak and anemic and those kind of things. So actually a normative judgment is made that actually shows you growth is good. And that's when we are at a party, and if we discuss over coffee later on, if we discuss whether growth is good, we all realize that there's evidence, it's not always good. But if you go to a party with people that don't actually know this, they will, and you say growth is not necessarily good, they will have this glassy gleam in their eye that they're like, yeah, that doesn't sound quite right. And that, to me, is, I think, that we have what I called in my book a GDP multinational. It's a very sophisticated, subsidized economic narrative that keeps on being perpetuated in society. And it's a great responsibility, I think, for us as economists, because we have been given this power of being the consultants or the problem solvers of the world, so to speak. But do we always necessarily have all the skills to solve all the problems? Yeah, that would be my response to the yeah.
the media are very important, not only the journalists. It's the media, the social media tell us what to do. And you are Italians. Do you ever think that one such great maximized or optimized model with dozens or 50 equations will ever be put into reality? Think of your politics. There are many parties that immediately say that's nonsense. I mean, politics is the important thing, and it's transported to us by the social media and by the other media too. So you are right, we should try to understand the interaction between the economy and the ecology, but then we must take into account what happens afterwards. And it's politics, politics, politics.
Can I come in? Can you hear me?
Please.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify a few things. What I showed yesterday are the mathematical modeling of the transition process. I traveled in more than 120 countries, talking with leaderships of the countries, governments, but not only politicians and policymakers, also leadership of businesses, financiers, the civil society. Now, the first thing they need is some science-based recommendation. The second thing they need, and it is part of what I showed yesterday, is the osmosis of this science-based recommendation with the stakeholders in a co-design mode. So yesterday I showed you how you have to bring together the systems. I showed you systems of the climate, the energy, the land use, the marine use, health, innovation, and embed the dynamic processes of change into the financial and socioeconomic system. But throughout this layer, the second layer that I showed you was stakeholder co-design. And I agree this is crucial. But to start co-designing with the stakeholders, you need to make sure that you have the scientific and research personnel to structure the conversation and found the conversation on science. Then you also need to make sure that you have the data and the modeling under your belt. You can efficiently collect the needed data and continue to collect it, and you can efficiently use it to get recommendations from your models. And then these recommendations, you discuss with your stakeholders. And we've done this in many countries across the globe. I can tell you that it takes at least 6 months just to agree between them on the status quo of their sector, where they are. Another 6 months where they want to go, even though that the policy is already voted for. And then you also need to acquire, to give them the capacity to really engage in this co-design of the transition processes. At the end of the day, what you achieve is a systems innovation where science and research and technology in a very interdisciplinary mode, engages in a co-design of the process of change with the different stakeholders. And these stakeholders, including the scientists, including the technology developers, the financiers, the businesses, the politicians, the policymakers, the civil society, are of course influenced by many things. First, their education level, their knowledge, their skills, the social media, the geopolitical situation. And all of these stakeholders influence politics. All of these stakeholders influence politics. So if the stakeholders are really powerful in terms of understanding what needs to be done, then politicians cannot ignore them. If the level of understanding of what needs to be done is very low, then politicians tango their own dance. So it is important to get the scientific foundations in the center of the picture, the technological advancements in the center of the conversations, and the upskilling and the deeper understanding from civil society into the center of the conversation. And then you become strong as a research community, as a technology development community, as civil society, as financing community, as businesses. You become strong because you know what needs to be done. And you know that there is the technology, the knowledge, and the money to do it. So in this way, you have the power, you have the means to actually influence what is going on the geopolitical scene and the national political scene, and avoid being navigated away from pathways that are going to get you somewhere where the welfare of people is supported.
Second question, which is the fact that multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and even transdisciplinary approaches have been claimed and have been acknowledged as essential for dealing with complexity. I do not, it's easy for me to understand that it's not easy among stakeholders to find a way for dealing with complexity, but even just remaining in the academia, it is really not easy to, while we all believe that is important, it is not so easy to find the proper space and room for facilitating a dialogue in this multidisciplinary perspective. Because even if the object is clear, the languages, the methods, the perspectives are different, and sometimes it's hard to harmonize these different languages and methods and try to make a joint effort for being able to give an answer to these complex questions. So my question for you is that how we can, I mean especially as academia, in the academia, how we can really try to facilitate this dialogue, and especially how we can try to deal with the responsibilities that we have regarding the new generation of scholars in providing these skills and competencies, these multidisciplinary skills and competencies, by being aware about the fact that then when they go to the job market, they have to qualify themselves. So they have to say, yes, I'm an economist, or a political scientist, or I'm a sociologist. Because still, I don't know, maybe in your countries may be different, but still in Italy, our disciplines are very much close and secluded in disciplinary silos. So it is in a way, quite a big responsibility to train a new generation of scholars, give them all these tools for being able to deal with complex issues from a multidisciplinary perspective, but then also to be sure that they will be able to publish their own work, to apply for a job in the academia, where we are not really so advanced in a way in this interdisciplinary dialogue. So my question for you is, what can we do on this regard? I don't know who would like to start first. Bruno, Frey, please.
We all like interdisciplinarity. Clearly, I love it. However, look, I have been in at least 20 commissions to elect professors. Listen what happens. Probably you know it yourself. First, everybody says, interdisciplinarity is great. However, as an economist, you must be able to teach economics 1, economics 2, microeconomics 1, microeconomics 2, microeconomics 3, and econometrics 1, 2, 3. And then everything about interdisciplinarity is lost. Therefore, it's not just something which must be, where people must be educated. We have to change the system of universities. And that is what I mentioned this morning. Sociological analysis of institutions. And the institutions we have now kill interdisciplinarity for an academic career. When you are old, you can do whatever you like.
Yeah, so as I said, I've just returned to academia, and it's been quite a shock, this publishing industry and how things have changed. I do think, yeah, there's this conundrum. I think Leonardo this morning talked about, this top 5 hegemony, and basically for tenure and for promotions. And I think, Bruno, that's exactly what you're saying as well, is that, it's kind of stuck in this economic, top 5, I would say, process. I'm, in that sense, a bit lucky that I'm at this environmental institute, and the requirements for publication are in different journals. And I wouldn't say that hasn't been shocking to me. Nature has now created, I think, dozens of subsidiary journals that we now publish in, like Nature Sustainability, Nature Climate Change. So I'm not saying that the publishing sector beyond economics is great, but it does. So perhaps at this moment in time, it sounds as if it's kind of a conundrum. If you want to become a great economist and you are beholden to this system of the top 5, then that's probably going to force you to be less interdisciplinary. Or perhaps then if you perhaps move into fields that are adjacent to this interdisciplinarity, like I am lucky to have, that I'm not beholden to that publishing regime. But I mean, the real solution is, of course, that economics in and of itself creates different incentives for, I guess, interdisciplinary research. But those are my reflections as a returner to the academic field.
Thank you. Would you like, please, to just share with us your thoughts regarding this question?
Yes, well, I would like to point to a success story. The framework programs of the European Commission, DG Research and Innovation, have for years been promoting interdisciplinary work. This is true interdisciplinary work. Each and every project, especially now in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, is bringing together the natural sciences, the technological sciences, the economic and social sciences, the policy and stakeholder sciences, and also communication and outreach and citizen science into one project. 5, 10, 20, 30 millions. Euphoria, my team is involved in more than 100 interdisciplinary projects. And out of these projects, there are many prestigious publications, and many prestigious careers have been formulated over the years. I work in this ecosystem the last almost 30 years, 28 actually, from my first project. So I showcase before your eyes and without any, reasonable doubt, a massive ecosystem change that produced a lot of research, a lot of innovation that has been implemented in real world and real economy, a lot of publications that promoted careers, and a lot of, I would say, mobilization of restructuring of the silos of departments in universities. I would also like to refer to another initiative of the ERC, the European Research Council. I am a European Research Council ambassador, as I am one of the people that were granted this prestigious research award and grant. Lately, the last 5 years, it has launched the Synergy Grant. The Synergy Grant is about financing cutting-edge interdisciplinary research. My Synergy Grant, which amounts to 10 million, brings together economics, behavioral and experimental economics, which I am the PI for, electrical engineering, mathematics, and hydroinformatics to design the future generation of water systems in the medium, short, and long run under ambiguity and uncertainty. So what I'm trying to convey here is that a lot has been done. And again, Europe is the leader in this. And there is no surprise for me, it's no surprise for me that this manifesto is being mobilized, is being initiated in Europe, because Europe has been the leader in this transformation of research from the silos of the discipline into interdisciplinarity. But I want to say something, and I'm closing with that. There is no way you will be very good in many disciplines. Usually how things are done, you are very acclaimed in your own discipline, but you also create an ecosystem of collaborators across other disciplines that are also leaders in their discipline. And these disciplinary leaders and their teams, without compromising the quality, the cutting edge, the frontier research in their own disciplines, come together and work together in order to produce solutions that are relevant to the real world. So the problems of the real world are never single discipline, or almost never single discipline. So there is a true need for these leading researchers to speak to leading researchers from other disciplines in order to solve a problem. So it's problem solving. And of course, curiosity is a big thing in this, and the ability through your curiosity to define explicitly a problem and define it in a way that is solvable through different disciplines is what is really the triggering of revealing a solution that is truly innovative. And when I'm referring to leading scientists, I'm also referring to all the teams that are involved in that leadership. So a leading scientist might have tens and hundreds of researchers that talk to tens and hundreds of researchers from other disciplinary leading scientists. And this way, you achieve a collaboration and osmosis that at the end of the day will allow you to understand a problem holistically and integrate the disciplines to provide the holistic solutions. It's hard work and it has to be incentivized. The research financing system of Europe has incentivized this with hundreds of millions over the last 30 years, even billions. And this has led to reformulation, slower, much slower, of the universities into more interdisciplinary departments, or into creating institutes within universities that allow the different departments to work together. The process is not as fast as we need it, but it's happening. And for me, the major two reasons that is happening is, first, the inner need of researchers to provide to society something that is implementable and will support the welfare of the people that are paying for this research. And the second one is because the financing structure of DG Research and Innovation has been clever and innovative beyond any other continent or any other country towards this dimension. And I'm very proud to be European in this regard.
The effort that the European Union is doing in order to support research, interdisciplinary research. I think that is a much more an internal issue, I would say, of my disciplines, economics, and probably my country, Italy, although I can understand that also in Switzerland it's not so far, it's not so different. The question is that although you have the opportunity, as I have also had, to work with the interdisciplinary groups, thanks to European funds, then when you have to go to publish your work, what you can do is to publish collected volume, for instance, in order to collect this different contribution. And according to the academic rules in the Italian system, a paper in the collective volume is almost a zero in terms of value. So this is the issue. So we have to change the rules. So this is exactly what Professor Bruno Frey was pointed out. So thank you. We are, again, a little bit in a delay, but I wish to thank you all the panelists for the very inspiring and reflections. Thank you so much to all of you. And then I would like to invite Leonardo to join us, because this is the final plenary session, so I think that is worth to have his concluding remarks.
I just want to add one word, which is the final word, but also something related to what they said here. I said they outlined very well the trade-off and the paradox of being heretic, okay? Because basically Bruno was heretic when he started Life Satisfaction, many years ago. We started corporate social responsibility. So when you are heretic, you have to do twice the effort of the other. You have to do much, much more effort. There's less room. But also you are moved by higher intrinsic motivation. So there is some energy supporting that effort. In the end, maybe the two things balance. I hope they do. And so my advice to the young, because of course it's also very true that when you get older, you can do whatever you like. And that's why we started the manifesto, because we think we have a responsibility toward the new generation, no? To create an easier path. Nothing is easy in life, but an easier path to develop this innovation to make economy something better. But I think that you cannot escape this heretic paradox, and my advice to the young is definitely to follow what we have done and what brought us here, because without that intrinsic motivation and that energy, maybe you stop in any case and you don't go ahead. So my point is thank you to everyone. We continue. There was a lot of passion and enthusiasm in these days. So I think that's the intrinsic motivation and energy we need to be happy to do our job, and I'm very happy. I said 9, 10 this morning, and but it's not finished. We have another parallel session, very interesting one, and then we have aperitivo where we say hello to each other. Okay, so thank you very much for being with you with this wonderful relational good.